Good morning and welcome to a special episode of Departures. We normally interview individuals who have engaged in some incredible writing relating to political science. But today I'm going to simply analyze the fairly in the last week concerning Ukraine-American relations.
Sorry, Bob, to interrupt you. Your connection froze you. Can you go back to I'm going to analyze and start there?
All right. Today I'm going to analyze the recent events concerning Ukraine-American relations. As many of you are aware, the events in the Oval Office that occurred with the meeting between Zelensky and the president and vice president have been compared by some to be equal in severity to 9/11, in that they represent an important strategic break with the past. I don't see that at all. And I wanted to make it clear to those of you who follow Departures that the analysis you're seeing from the hysterics at CNN actually make very little sense. CNN has been on a continuous loop concerning justifying Zelensky's existence, justifying the argument that he is not a dictator. So let me first go into his democratic credentials. Then we will talk about the event at the White House, and then we'll talk further about the future of U.S.-Ukraine-European relations. Firstly, I am not going to call him a dictator. I'm just going to address facts that I know, not only from reading these facts, but from being in daily contact with Ukraine and having visited Ukraine during the war as a result of my role as counsel to the majority church of Ukraine, which is the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So firstly, the secret police in Ukraine have complete control of the country. Secondly, under the Ukrainian constitution, there is actually no excuse for an election not to be held. There is every excuse for the Rada not to have an election called. There is no excuse for the president not to have had a presidential election called. And many of us who have been plugged into people in Ukraine were made very well aware that Zelensky had been considering an election, but the polls were too low. And two things happened at that time. One, Zaluzhny, the general who in fact saved Kiev, was polling far higher than he was, which is why he was fired and moved to an ambassadorship in England. And secondly, that is the reason there has been no election in Ukraine. He knew he would lose. So, what he's done to the church that I speak about regularly in terms of its suppression, in terms of the violence, it goes completely unremarked in the West. We have a press who is engaged in hero worship and censorship to an incredible degree. And that censorship does the global public very little good, as you can see by the reaction to what happened at the White House. President Trump is, in many respects, being fairly courageous in setting out to Ukraine and the American people the fact that the level of death being visited on the younger generation of Ukraine simply doesn't make sense. Yes, the Europeans are desperate to keep the war going and to support Zelensky in every way, but there doesn't appear to be any chance of Ukraine improving its lot, as was the case in World War II, when the Russians get themselves mobilized and learn from the chaos of their first year of war. They seem able to regroup and act in a coherent and intelligent way, and they are slowly gaining ground on Ukraine. An end to this war is to attempt to retain as much of the land of Ukraine as possible for the leadership of the Ukrainian people. Now, very many people in England have said, well, would England have ever negotiated with a foreign occupier on its land? Well, the situation is not similar to Munich because there have been 3 years of war, and many of those people in the occupied territories speak Russian, have some affinity to the occupier, and in fact, in the case of Crimea, there was a real argument as to whether, in fact, the Ukrainians could have even won a referendum were one to be held. But the point is, Trump is demonstrating foresight in trying to force a peace at a point in time where Ukraine's options seem truly limited. And why is this not Munich? Because there have been 3 years of war. There have been catastrophic damage to Ukraine's people and to its country. And it makes very little sense to continue with no prospect of success. The analogy is much more to Potsdam, where there was an assessment of the relative strengths of West and East, and there was a rapprochement or an understanding of a new demarcation. So I believe we in the United States need to give the Trump administration time to attempt to work out their negotiating strategy. I am not a fan of this rare earth deal. If it's realistic at all, it does tend to besmirch the sacrifice of the American and the Ukrainian people in respect to their attempt to save the sovereign territory of Ukraine and save it from what has been a very rough and difficult occupation. In fact, I want to make it very clear that one of our issues with President Zelensky has been his attempt to destroy the majority church in the country during wartime, which is something that even Stalin did not do during the Second World War, though he was obviously opposed to the importance of religion in the life of the Soviet Union. In respect to the European meetings that were held in London Sunday, I want to make something clear. While everyone may be opposed to the tone of the meeting in the White House, everyone is turning to Trump's demand that they increase defense spending. This is the thing about Trump. While he often conducts himself in a manner that many of us find very hard to swallow, a lot of the themes he pursues make a lot of sense. Europe does need to spend far more on defense than it's spending. Its reassurance to Ukraine is hollow. It simply doesn't have the ammunition. It doesn't have the economic force. It doesn't have the people to defend Ukraine properly. And after 3 years of war, it hasn't mobilized. The countries that have mobilized are the United States and Russia, two of the key 3 countries that are going to negotiate an end to the war. So I say to you in earnest, to get past the atmospherics of what happened in the Oval Office and understand that what Trump has said about Zelensky is very true. He is not the most popular political leader. He does not have a constitutional mandate. He may well be personally courageous. His first days after the invasion were truly awe-inspiring. But what he's done in terms of the Ukrainian people and their suppression of opposition and the untold levels of corruption that are ongoing in Ukraine, combined with the destruction of the media, the destruction of political parties, this does not bode well as a democracy. And Americans need to understand that their government has spent tens of billions of dollars basically keeping together a police state. And we as a country have got to stop supporting individuals as opposed to institutions. We cannot preach institutional development, democracy, the rule of law, and yet worship Zelensky as a demigod without any concern as to about what he's doing in his own country. Nor can we allow our press to continue to engage in the level of self-censorship that they are engaging in. They need to report what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. Rather, what they are doing now is instrumentalizing a false narrative of Ukraine to attract President Trump. We are back in the old Russia narrative, where somehow President Trump is portrayed as a Russian asset. This is the guy, unlike Obama, who actually gave javelins to Ukraine. People need to look at the record of what this man has done as opposed to his method of delivery. The guy who in the end gave Ukraine what it needed was Trump and not Obama. And the bottom line to what's going on today is it is Trump who is being realistic about a terrible situation in Ukraine that is consuming an entire generation of Ukrainians. If the Europeans want to step up, what they should do is stop the hero worship and dedicate 5% of their economies to defense, not the average, which is about 1.5% annually. So I'm asking those who follow departures to please look at the facts and not be overwhelmed by the false news we're being fed by the legacy media day in and day out. Thank you.